Hola y bienvenidos. You're listening to Dual Language Diaries. We're two bilingual teachers, one from Italy and one from Mexico. We share real stories from the classroom, honest conversations about language and culture, and a whole lot of corazón.
Whether you're a fellow educator, a parent, or just curious about bilingual education, we're so glad you're here.
I'm Cindy.
I'm Raquel, and this is our space to talk about teaching, learning, and everything in between in two languages and one big community.
Well, in our last episode, we share our stories. Today, we're talking about why we chose bilingual education and why it matters more than people think.
But hold on. First, let's talk about what made us laugh this week. So, I am a science teacher, and I was talking about forces with my kiddos. And man, as a second and third language learner, I was struggling with the word buoyancy. So I had my kids tell me how to pronounce it. And I was going around the classroom with this post it note. And every time there was a word buoyancy, I was like, buoyancy, buoyancy. The kids were laughing. It was funny though.
You know what? For me, I think it was not this week. It was last week. We were reading something. I'm a reading teacher. I teach in Spanish, but since we're bilingual, well, we do both. No, so I don't know. We were reading something about a story, and then we had the word scars, scares, and then some of my kiddos very politely were like, "Miss, it's," and they didn't even say me. It's like they didn't interrupt me to correct me, but I asked them to
Mhm.
read. And as they were reading, they were like, scared. So whatever the word is. And I was like, okay. And then I tried to repeat it, but then I still wasn't getting it properly.
Mhm.
And so eventually they were like, okay, you can say whatever. But you know what? I remember that a few years ago, some students correct me because in Mexico we have the bees,
Mhm.
like bees in B. They sound the same. So I was like boulevard and boulevard, and the kids were like, "Miss, it's boulevard." And I was like, "Okay, I get it." So yeah, it's one of those things that since you were bilinguals, sometimes we don't get it right at first. But anyway, that made me laugh.
So let's talk about why we chose bilingual education because it's a big choice.
Mm. Oh boy. You know what? In For me it was rather easy because I'm from Monterrey and Monterrey is very close to the border from Texas and like the United States. So in my career, I used to work in public and private education, mostly private education. So we used to teach English as a second language. So it was there. It was part of the education that we were teaching. We had to teach. I was teaching English as a second education. There was a teacher that taught Spanish, and there was a teacher that taught English, math in English, and math in Spanish. So depending on the school that I was working, but it's always been there. Like ever since I was a little girl,
Mhm.
my mom will like get us, me and my sister, like a whole set of books or videos that were in English because that was the thing. You had to learn English because you were very close to the border and we
Mhm.
used to go shopping and whatever. So it was important for us to learn that. And in a way it kind of gave you a certain status. If you knew English you could go like
Mhm.
to private schools or that sort of thing. So it was kind of like that was the goal, to learn English.
Mhm.
But when it came to working, I actually didn't. My first choice was to work as a doctor. I wanted to be a plastic surgeon.
Yes.
I wanted to be a plastic surgeon. I did the whole thing and I didn't like it. So I ended up going to Filosofía y Letras in la Universidad Autónoma de Nuevo León. And a friend of mine told me, there's this career that you can, teach English as a second language and it's about education. I was like, yes, I'm in. So it's, as an educator, then it was like you have to teach either Spanish or English. And that was it was giving you a certain, they will pay you more,
Mhm.
of course, because you were teaching either language. um, Even for us, like in the university, we had to, my whole career was in English except the first semester. So the, like everything, all of the subjects were in English. Some of them were in Spanish, but most of them were in English. So we could get away with having what was it, TOEFL.
Yeah, it's the language proficiency in English. I don't
I think it
remember
was a
what it.
TOEFL and something. So we could get away with not having that test. But the other schools in Mexico, you have to graduate with a second language,
Uh,
whichever you decide. But most of us chose English. So, it was kind of like an easy path for me. And I love English. I grew up watching movies, listening to songs.
mhm.
Backstreet Boys back then were, I wanted to learn all the songs. So it was kind of like an easy path for me to choose being bilingual.
Well, for me, it's different because, again, grew up in Italy. Uh, yes, we're taught English since I think it was third grade at that time. Now I think they push it back to like kinder and stuff. But again, you're taught the basic, like what to order at a restaurant, or the colors, or the numbers, or if you get lost in the city, how do you ask for directions? Like all of those that, yes, so they are important, but they don't help you with conversational English. It's mainly, for us, it's mainly about grammar. They're super focused on the verb tenses. Like it's in Italy, where everything is like grammatically correct, and they want us to do the same thing in English. How many times have you used in a sentence at school and anywhere the perfect continuous? I
Oh,
was
I
like,
know.
dude, whatever. So English, I've never saw the other side of the medal because English was my first language. At school, I learned English, but we had a lot of immigrants. So we saw a lot of people coming from Arabic countries struggling through that. And we have a class in a way that's called alfabetizzazione, which basically they're taught because they grew up with a different alphabet, they grew up with different sounds, they're taught the sounds. So
Mm.
the blending of two letters, the syllables, that's something that they do. I've never done it, so not that struggle.
Mm.
Like you, I grew up watching Grey's Anatomy, so of
Mm.
course you go through the path of medical school. The whole thing was me. I wanted to be Meredith Grey, general
Everybody,
surgery.
we all wanted to be
Like the whole thing
Meredith.
about opening you up and knowing what's inside. That's my whole thing. Like behind the scene, I want to know. Whatever. So, grow up, I go to what we call Liceo Linguistico, which is a high school that it's focused mainly on foreign languages. At that time that I went, we had the first 2 years with Latin, so it helped a lot growing up, growing your background.
Mhm.
And then we had English, French, and German taught from what we call prima superiore, which is ninth grade here, to 13th grade because we have an extra year. So learning different languages, not perfect, of course, absolutely not. Again, that grammatically part. Um, I got lost. Hold on.
You went for German. You chose German for a certain.
Oh yeah, it was English, French, and German. And so yes, you battle with the second language acquisition, but it wasn't like here where you're asked to speak it. For us, it was mainly like, yeah, well, you have to speak it, but
Mostly
it's
constructing
a
sentences,
language.
and yeah,
It's
it's
a
a like.
language class. It's not content in that language. You're learning the language, not the content in that language. I decided to come here, even though I was trying to go to pre-med, of course. And yeah, the career of becoming a teacher was cool. I learned Spanish here, and they
The
told
hard
me
way.
the hard way, of course, the hard way, thanks to the boyfriend. Um, and they were telling you, like, do you want to do English as a second language, or would you like to be both? My thing, I also wanted to teach Italian, but it's not something common here unless you go to either high school or university,
Mm.
which super weird. Why do people learn Italian? But okay, cool.
Well, I did. I'll tell you. I'll tell you about it.
But it's the whole thing where you learn another language, and to me, why not? Man, I learn another language. Why don't teach both languages?
Mhm.
Because again, I did not know how the whole system worked. I
Mhm.
thought like in the same class you were teaching the same languages. Nope, that's not how it goes here.
No, but you know what? Also, for example, I've been a teacher for what 19 years, 20 years. Um, as my experiences, happened, I learned that teaching English as a second language is one thing. Teaching Spanish as a second language is another. Teaching content in Spanish is another thing. And then teaching here, when I was in Mexico, and teaching here in the US, of course, you can't teach English as a second language, only to those kiddos that come, ¿cómo se llaman?
Newcomers.
Newcomers. And then you teach here mostly Spanish as a second language, which is the content in Spanish, which is a struggle that we have as educators here in this system, because many people think that in our bilingual classes, we teach Spanish to the students, but we don't teach the language, we teach through Spanish. I don't know if that
Like we
makes sense.
teach the content. Like I'm teaching you how to read, the reading skills. I'm teaching you science, the content of it. I'm teaching you what force is, what mass is. I'm just switching the language.
Assuming that they have a
That's the
foundation
thing.
in that language, but it doesn't happen, which is one of the things that we'll talk later in another episode about it. But yeah, going back to the Italian, which is amazing, because when I was in Mexico, so I said right that we were able to get away from the TOEFL because the whole career was in English, so we had to choose another language. So I chose Italian, and I always, I went to Italy. I studied Italian there, and it was amazing. And then just having, meeting someone here that was Italian, it was just like it was a dream come true. I really wanted to have someone to practice Italian with, but I need to practice more. But anyway, yeah. So it's been quite a journey, and I love bilingual education, and we'll get a little bit more into what we like and what we don't like about it. But that'll be in a
You
different
see,
episode.
thinking about those misconceptions, and I had the big one because I thought seriously what our job as bilingual teacher was teaching the class in English and then translating the same class in
Hmm.
Spanish.
Hmm.
Like it's just a translating the entire class because I guess that's how the kids are learning it because the kids speak Spanish, the kids speak English. They know both languages, so you're teaching both languages. No, it's not. Because one, as a reading teacher, we know it's not the same thing.
Hmm.
In one language, you have a certain grammatic structure that you don't have the same thing in Spanish, for example. In Spanish, you have to teach the gender of the word,
Yeah.
right? We don't have to do that in English because
Hmm.
it doesn't have it. Everything is neutral. So it's very different. Like it's not the same class.
Hmm.
So I think that was one of my big misconception when it comes to bilingual education. Bilingual education is not a translation of that language.
Hmm. And you know what? The other day I was talking to my assistant principal about it, and because I was telling him that I had a dream in English, and he was like, "How can you have a dream in English if your first language is Spanish?" And I was like, "That's one of the a misconception that people have. Like, if your first language is whatever language, then that's the only language that you think. And when you're bilingual or trilingual, whatever, you tend to
You
dream or
Mhm.
to have thoughts in that other language. And I love that about being bilingual because of the connections that the brain does, and all of those things. But it is a misconception. Like if you would, whatever first language it
Mm.
is, because he was like so into, but why don't you, just think in Spanish and then you translate? Well, like I don't do that. Like I can think in that other language.
Mhm.
But when it comes to counting, and I was telling him, when it comes to counting, if it goes past 10, I need to
To be in
count in
Spanish.
Spanish. Otherwise, I get lost. I mean, I can't do it. Don't get me wrong, I can't do it. But
You
it's
have to
like,
think about
it's
it.
more, it's easier
Mhm.
to count or to do math in my first language than in English.
I was
So,
reading about the dreaming. I was reading back when I was in college a study that supposedly the second you dream in the other language that you are acquiring, it's when you can define yourself as a true
mhm,
bilingual.
mhm.
And I remember once I was dreaming. My parents don't, well, my dad speaks a little bit of English. My mom doesn't speak it. Otherwise, then, like, we were
Mhm.
joking about her having to at least learn some stuff in case she gets lost and she has to order
Oh,
food.
yeah, yeah,
So she
yeah.
can get water, potatoes, and bacon. That's the only thing she can get. And I remember this dream. In that dream, my mom was speaking English to me. And I remember being aware of, you don't speak English. So I'm
How
a
are you
true
doing?
bilingual now. Like in my dream, being aware of that.
Mhm.
And yes,
It happens. Mhm.
but
Okay.
again, same thing. To me, it's when I skip count, and when I skip count by three, I just can't do it in English or in Spanish. It has to be in Italian. And like the or like counting the kids with random numbers. And
Mhm.
like the kids were like, Miss, what is that? It's Italian. Leave me alone. I just can't.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, those numbers, addition, subtraction. Like when I'm doing those things, I have to do it in Spanish. Oh, well, an impact that we've had as a bilingual student. I mean, having bilingual students. Oof. Um, you know what? I'm thinking. I'm going back. So I in Mexico, I used to teach again English as a second language, and I used to work at this school. And I taught like almost every grade level, but they grouped them by ages. So I had pre-K, I had, pre-K kinder, whatever grade. But my toughest class was adults. Adults. So they used to come to that school to learn English as a second language from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. And they wanted me to translate everything. And I had a really hard time because then you have, in English, you have do and does, and you have did, right, for past. So they wanted me to translate that, like literally
What is
transliterate
mm-hmm.
like a sentence, like, I don't know. Does your pen work? How do I translate that in Spanish? Tu pluma funciona. But where does that, where do I put that does? Like, how do I translate that? It doesn't
They were
have a
that
direct
they want that
translation.
word, the
So it
translation.
was really difficult because they already had a foundational language. They had their own, way of thinking, and it was a struggle. It was a struggle. But in the end, I always told them that, you're here to learn how to communicate. Yes, you have to learn the grammar. It is very important, but what is the usage that you're going, like, what do you want to get out of this class? And they were like, I want to be able to communicate when I go to, Macallen or whatever, and then ask a burger. Then it's conversational. Like, that's why I'm here for. I'm here to teach you how to try to converse, how to have vocabulary and all that. And eventually they did. And we had a lot of conversations, a lot of, your turn and then my turn. And then we had a lot of sharing. But it was very, very difficult for me to just make them understand that you can just literally translate. Like you can go around translating everything, because then it's going to be difficult for them. It is difficult for you if you want to like transliterate. Um, but eventually they got it and they graduated, and I was so proud of them. But it was hard.
Well, again, I work here with bilingual population, right? And I feel for me, a real impact that I think we have, it's with the two newcomers we had
Mm.
last year and a couple of years before, where those kids come with zero English foundation, like zero. And you see them in class struggling to understand the very basics. But you, as a teacher, you know how to pass that barrier in a way. Because, again, at one point I was teaching English and math, and supposedly I was not allowed to speak Spanish with those kiddos.
Mm.
And you have a kiddo who just got here from Venezuela, and he could not speak English. Like, maybe yes, hello, and
Mhm.
teacher, but that's it. And you're like, how do I make you, one, feel good being here? Two, how do I push for you to communicate with your classmate? Because yes, you can communicate with the Spanish speaking kids. Absolutely. But I don't want you to communicate with just three kids. I want you to communicate with everybody.
Mhm.
I want you to talk to me. I want you to talk to the neighbor. I want you to talk to everybody. So I feel like that repetition, or even the silly part of, okay, you tell me in English, I'm telling you in Spanish, or well, the opposite around. I'm sorry. You tell me in Spanish, I tell you in English, and then you try to say it.
Mhm.
It was just like that. Let's try to do it.
Mm. Do you remember the name of um, this short kid that we had? They're the sixth graders now. I think
Which,
that
by the way, every single morning he comes and gives me a hug. I'm like, oh
I
my
know
god.
every time I see him, he's amazing. But that thing that was a student, like you're saying, like a newcomer, no foundation in English, some gaps even in Spanish, and it was difficult for me to because I was teaching him Spanish, and then but we decided that what, you're here in the U.S., we have to choose, and then he eventually got to be a really good reader in Spanish, and then he was able to communicate in English, and I think that's I remember that time when I think he was in recess. Something happened. Maybe we were in recess, and then I heard him saying something in English to another, one of those kiddos, and I was like, wow. I'll never forget that moment when he started talking in English too. Just communicating
It's because
and just
it's
playing.
that, like, you see the kids transition from being friend with just the Spanish speaking kids to going the extra mile and speaking English,
Mm.
conversational, anything but something. Man, reflecting on it, I think that if there's one thing I wish people in general knew, is that, one, it's extremely hard to be a bilingual teacher.
Oh, yeah.
Because again, it's not just, oh, I'm speaking Spanish, oh, I'm speaking English, oh, okay, everybody's learning, because not everybody has the same amount of knowledge in that language. But also is that I'm not just teaching you a language, I'm teaching you a culture.
Mm.
I am teaching you literacy in that language. I am teaching you how that language works. Man, 3 years ago, I was at Target, X, right? Hearing somebody speaking Italian,
Mhm.
I had the chills. That's
Mm.
home.
Mm.
That's home.
Yeah.
Again, like, silly thing, when I'm bringing tiramisu here at school, it's like I'm bringing you my
A part of me.
my culture, my food. I'm bringing you me as a whole.
Mhm.
So I feel like that's what bilingual education is, not just the language.
And it is sometimes difficult to um it is difficult. I think that because people don't understand that it's a different way of like thinking, and how to get people to understand that. It's I don't know if I'm making sense, but I think that as a bilingual teacher in a public setting like we have right now, because in Mexico it's completely different, right? Like I said, we are very closer to the border. It's kind of like a need. You need to like people go
Mhm.
to school and they want to learn English, which is very different here because the kiddos that are put in our classrooms, the ones that are newcomers or the ones that first language is Spanish and they're learning English, they have to learn that language because it's it's survival, right? If they don't speak it, it's survival. And we have seen so many kids move really fast into talking in English because they need to communicate. There's You have to, like, there's no other way. And I think that that's a thing that, going a little bit into the educational system, that sometimes people don't like, people that are above us, right? Like other educators that make laws or whatever, that they don't understand how difficult it is for a student to go through that process. And us as teachers, that we feel so much like, I have time restraints, I have curriculum restraints, resources restrained. We don't have many, resources in Spanish. You just simply don't have the time to sit with you and give you all of this, and it's just like throwing you into the arena, and
The
then just,
lions then.
yeah, do it yourself. It is. I feel sometimes like we're doing at these surveys, but again, that's a conversation for another episode. But I just really wish that it's really hard, that they knew that it's really hard for the student to come to this setting and just, be successful. It takes a lot of things for them to succeed, but they are doing it. It's not that they can, but they are doing it. So yeah.
Well, it was a good episode today.
Mm.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to listen to what we're saying.
Well, if you are a bilingual teacher, know one, or we're taught by one, share this with your friends. And we're so happy to see you in our next episode. So stay tuned.
Bye.
Bye.